In a series of special exhibits and events at the Gardner Museum, you can explore the artistic possibilities of textiles. Part of the series are the workshops led by our guest, the museum's Thayer Starr Artist and local craftsperson, Shane Maxwell. Thank you very much for being with us, Shane.
Thanks for having me.
Shane, before we get into what you're doing at the museum, tell us about what you were doing before you started at the Gardner.
So for the past 4 years, I've been at Boston Ballet in their costume shop. Started out in crafts, making more jewelry, masks, sculptural elements, and moved from there into the surface design. So painting and dyeing all of the fabrics that you see in our costumes.
Now, that might sound at first as if you're just designing clothes for people to wear, but you know, when you're in the audience looking at a ballet, why is color so important? What's going on there that you're trying to design?
Well, you really have to work with the designer to hit the balance. You don't want the costumes to be, in some cases you want the costumes to be the focal point, and other times they need to blend in with the set. In order to tell the story, sometimes you need to emphasize certain characters, so the balance between the colors you see on stage can really pull things out or set things back. And those are all things that we need to pay attention to when we are designing the look of the costumes.
Well, now you switch from that environment to the Gardner Museum. Some of us who've been there a few times, we know about the tapestries in the tapestry room, but what's so special about textiles at the museum?
Well, you really don't realize how much there is in the Gardner in the context of textiles until you really start looking for it and you start to notice all the fabrics that they put behind paintings and all of the different drapes and textile treatments around windows. And when you really start looking, the more you see that it's really integrated into a lot of facets of the museum.
And of course, the other thing that's interesting here is that people like me who are not really that educated in the art, I see tapestry, oh, that's a rug.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a rug and art?
Really the context you put it in. The tapestries a lot of times were meant to be hung and not put on the floor, but you'll go into the Common Threads exhibit now and you will see a rug hung on the wall, and they kind of are playing with that context and allowing you to see the artistry within rugs and things that we use every day. That's something the Gardner Museum is really great at. You see a lot of objects within the museum that you would use on a regular basis, but they're exceptional examples of those things that we think of as an everyday object.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Shane Maxwell from the Gardner Museum. Shane, in your workshops, you're going to be helping people who produce some maybe everyday objects in the home, but objects that are really very creative in a way. Explain how this is going to work.
So I designed these workshops along with the museum to be very approachable, unintimidating for guests to come in and be able to make something by hand, which is something that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to do every day. So we tried to stick with some simple process that creates something fun that people can take home with them. So simple wrapping techniques to make tassels and pom-poms, and some macrame techniques for netted pot hangers, weavings, and you can kind of stay and play and experiment as much as you want and combine all of those things in a way you see fit. So it kind of encourages visitors to use their creativity and mix and match.
Now, what about people out there who say that this ought to look very interesting, but doing it, working with threads, isn't that difficult? I mean, how do you get people over that hump?
So I made very clear written instructions. We have visual templates that people can follow along with. So we have different media for people who learn in different ways to engage the project from different angles. Pom-poms and tassels might be easier than doing the macrame, so you can start there, and once you kind of realize that you're able to do it, you can kind of move through the rest of the workshop.
Now, one of the other things that's going on in the museum at the same time, there are special exhibits by contemporary artists showing new things that can be done with textiles. Anything you can tell us about some of those?
Yeah, it's a really interesting exhibit. It's kind of centered around the theme of storytelling and textiles within the context of that. So we have these really old tapestries that are part of the museum's collection that have just been refurbished, and the Gardner Museum is really good at keeping this collection, that they have a very strict order to not make any changes. They're doing a really good job at keeping the collection current and relevant. So what they're doing is taking contemporary examples of textiles that many were made in the same way that they were made hundreds of years ago, but they're telling stories that are more relevant to today. And to see the textiles in the new gallery and the tapestries in the palace of the museum together, making that connection is really powerful.
We should mention, if people want some more information, at least about your workshops, how can they find that?
Sure. You can check on the Isabella Stewart Gardner's website, and you can find more information about my Saturday studio workshops.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Shane Maxwell from the Gardner Museum.